and welcome to Hopeful Conversations brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Drew Petersen, a professional skier, runner, enthusiast, and the producer and manager of numerous ski films. And he also likes burritos. I thought that was fun. After facing a hardship that changed his life, Drew realized his passion for mental health and has now dedicated his time to spreading suicide awareness while persevering his love for the outdoors. Drew, thanks so much for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations.
Thanks for having me on. It's awesome to be here and, connecting with the youth and the next generation is what I'm most motivated by and inspired by in the conversation around mental health.
Youth are very inspiring. Yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's start from the beginning. Drew, can you tell us a bit about how you got involved in skiing in the first place, the role it plays in your life, and then your near-death incident at Mount Hood? That's a lot in one question. So tell us how
That
you...
is that is a lot in one question. uh, Man, I guess we'll just start with skiing. Um, I grew up in Summit County, Colorado, so I grew up right in a ski town, in a ski community, and my parents raised me and my brother there pretty much so that we could be born on skis. So when I was 1.5 is when I started skiing.
1.5. Wow.
It really just accelerated from there. Um, it's kind of hard to like follow that arc of starting at 1.5 all the way to building a professional career, but I just developed a love and a passion for it at a young age and went from there. Honestly, it just kind of snowballed. And so I started having a lot of success in the ski world really when I was in high school, when I was a teenager.
Okay.
And from there, I started building a professional career. I'm 28 years old, and this is what I'm fortunate enough to call my job.
Yeah, that is. I can hear that, and the research doing that you do feel fortunate to be able to doing it. So I guess in May of 2017 is when you had an accident at Mount Hood, Oregon. What do you want to tell our listeners about that event?
Yeah, so that accident in May of 2017 is while I was on a road trip to climb and ski the highest peak in every state of the American West. And like you mentioned, we were on Mount Hood in Oregon. And so that morning, I was transitioning my skis from skiing down to climbing up. And while transitioning, I heard the crack of rock fall. And for people who have spent a lot of time in the mountains, the crack of rock fall is a super distinct noise. And when it happens, you know that something's coming down from above, but we're trained not to look up and see where it's going. You're trained just to curl over, kind of turtle over, put your head down to the hillside and hope that it doesn't hit you. And on that day, it was the first sound, it was the first sign of any rock fall of the whole day. And across an entire mountainside, it fell directly on top of me. So it was about the size of a microwave. And this rock fell from probably about 40 feet above, fell directly on the back of my head, in the middle of my upper back, and on my left arm. And then from there, we just jumped into action so that we could stop the bleeding in my arm because I was scared that I would bleed out or that I would need rescue. And if I required rescue, then that would have put rescuers at risk of serious life or limb. And so we self rescued off of the mountain and then climbed off of that face of the mountain on the east side, skied down the south face, back down to Timberline Ski Area where we were able to get help and get a helicopter to fly me to Portland, Oregon to a trauma center. And so that experience is really, a turning point in my life. So the reason that that is the such a core part of the focus in my film Ups and Downs is because that was a real turning point for me from a lifetime of struggles with mental health until this near death situation that made me, you know, expose what was really going on inside. And since then I've been on the journey to end up where I am now, where I get to use my struggles to help other people.
Hmm. I watched that video just today. It's really, it's such a good watch for anybody that likes skiing and likes mental health, and for just, you are so eloquent in that. your poise at the time of your accident, it was like, wow. And then how you talk about like it kind of like this is a catalyst. Like 2017 was definitely a before and after. Is that how you feel? Like that accident?
Yeah, I'm careful to not define myself by that one moment,
Yeah.
but it was definitely a huge turning point, and I look at it as a huge opportunity. It gave me a second chance at life. So in that sense, yeah, there's definitely a before and after.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. So we're going to move on to question number two. What mental health struggles have you faced and what proved helpful for you in working to get better?
Ooh, that's also a very big question that could take an hour-long interview to get into. I guess I'll kind of address that like chronologically.
Okay.
So, especially why I'm excited to talk with you and your organization is because I struggled with mental health all the way back to when I was a little kid. So the earliest memory that I have of suicidal thoughts is from when I was 9 or 10 years old. I was in elementary school, and from there, I just kept it silent, kept it totally secret. And I struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts through my life up until, I had this experience. I had this rockfall accident. And after that accident happened, I really spiraled out of control. So
You
in
did.
2017, I I the best way that I can describe it is that I felt like a ghost following around my body,
Yeah.
just watching myself go through the motions of life, but not actually being there. And so during that time, things started getting a lot darker and a lot deeper than they'd ever been. And my suicidal thoughts got more intense and got scarier. And then in 2018, you know, 15 months after the Rockfall accident, I could tell that what I was experiencing was probably PTSD.
Okay.
And I reached a point where I was either going to kill myself or I was going to ask for help. And fortunately, I decided to ask for help. And so I reached out and I found a therapist in 2018. And that was my first experience getting help. And
Why do
at
you
that
think
point in
you
time,
decided to ask for help? Can you pinpoint like something that was different at that moment compared to years and having these thoughts before?
uh, um, in 2018, there were a couple different things that led to that. The intensity of my suicidal thoughts and the intensity of my depression was ramping up. But then in August of 2018, I was um, I was coming off of a really bad winter. The winter following that rockfall accident, my emotional trauma manifested in physical injury. So I dislocated both my shoulders multiple times, and um, my right shoulder dislocated in my sleep. That's how bad it was getting. And so I got bilateral shoulder surgeries, one on each shoulder, which ended my winter that year. And then in the summer, right when I got cleared to trail run again, which is my summer passion,
Okay.
I tripped and fell and I broke my collarbone. And I think that I sustained a minor concussion that day too, which actually was a really big positive. I know it's weird to call a concussion a positive, but one of the less talked about symptoms of concussion is the loss of emotional control. And so when that happened, I finally let my guard down. I
Really?
started crying and bawling my eyes out, and I couldn't hide the pain that I was in anymore. And so that very day is when I asked my mom and my brother to hold me accountable to finding help.
Okay.
And that was a huge point too, was asking for my loved ones, for my brother and my mom to hold me accountable, because that helped me follow through and actually ask for help for the first time in my life.
Hmm. Wow. I just need to take a breath because I mean, I obviously have personal trauma in my life and I've never been diagnosed with depression, but I can recognize a lot of from listening to people that have like how close I was and and what a different position I am now because I do receive talk therapy and put the work into being okay, really being okay. So you were good at hiding your feelings prior to hiding your thoughts.
Yeah, very good at hiding all of it, and I also would put up this front that I was always happy all the time, and that's what I was largely known for, was how happy and joyful that I, you know, externally, outwardly seemed.
Did you feel responsibility for that happiness that you were kind of giving to others?
To some element, I think that I expected myself to keep showing up in that way because I felt like that was a big part of my identity, and I didn't want to express or outwardly show the pain and the negative side that I was feeling because I didn't want to drag other people down. So in that sense, I felt a responsibility.
Hmm. Yeah. Robbie was a very happy individual. He always had a smile on his face. And I mean, if you read about diagnosable many different mental health conditions, is people get really, really good at masking and just not showing that and like showing a complete opposite, which is um, hard to hear as a parent, as a love or somebody that cares about other people. Um, that's a skill that you kind of learn.
It really is, and in the more recent years of my life, I've seen that pattern, um, show up in a lot of other people. So when I see people who are outwardly and bubbly and um, you know, expressing this extreme happiness all of the time, like those are the people who I try to check in on, and those are the people who I wonder about, and who I think that we need to give them permission to have space to not be happy all the time.
Mhm. I'm sure that you like with your lived experience and now, feeling better and doing better, right? That you want to help others. So that that's tough. That's really tough. Uh, do you feel like after Mount Hood that your approach to life changed a little bit?
My approach to life didn't change too much immediately afterwards. I kept using skiing and running as my really only two outlets, that and drinking, and
Diversions.
so things didn't change right away. Really, it took going to therapy, and then it took years of therapy. It also took addressing that PTSD, but then I got two other diagnoses: type 2 bipolar disorder, post concussion syndrome. So going through brain rehab for my concussions, and then also addressing this bipolar 2 diagnosis and learning how to live with that, and learning what elements of myself that could help explain, but also how I could learn how to navigate that in a healthy, constructive sense. And that's where it really came from.
Do your mom and your brother still hold you accountable?
That's a good question. Um, Sometimes, family dynamics are always tough, but what has been really cool through this experience is that this has created a lot of space in my family to just be more real and be able to talk, about what's going on. And that's not just true for me; it's true for my other family members too. And it's awesome that I've been able to lean on them, but also now that I have the space and the capacity that they're able to lean on me.
Yeah. You're vulnerable, therefore other people can be vulnerable with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
vulnerability begets vulnerability.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a learned skill, vulnerability. I feel find like it's not easy to sit in tough stuff, but it gets easier after you sit in it and you are okay with talking about it, hearing about it from other people's perspectives. Um, one thing I
Yeah,
really
just like
go ahead.
on that note, just like anything in life, vulnerability takes practice. Like we're not able to just expose our hearts and souls, and be able to sit with that or be able to do it in a constructive manner right away. Like we need to dip our toe into the water of vulnerability and start to show who we are, and start to show elements of ourselves that we're uncomfortable with, where we're able to connect on a deep level. And you know that practice practice is what's going to create more space for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, it is a practice. In the film, you talk about emotional control. What is what does that mean to you?
Yeah, emotional control, especially in the film, what I'm referencing when we bring that up is when I was a kid, and, um, I didn't really realize this until going through this process and actually until meeting my neurologist that as a kid, I was leaning on skiing to give me emotional control because when I would take risks, past, I had to be fully present, and, you know, when I was skiing, say I was 10 years old, I'm skiing 50 miles an hour and I'm going off jumps, like, nothing else matters, and that feels really good, and that was emotional control in that sense, and I carried that with me through, into adulthood, and in adulthood, I started to try to find emotional control in other ways too, and then when that broke down and the outlets that I only relied on, like skiing, were taken away, and I lost my emotional control, and I wasn't able to take care of myself. And then I think it's important to note that along with emotional control and learning now to have emotional control for myself comes with that emotional intelligence and being able to be mindful and be aware of what I'm really experiencing so that I can, handle it and handle myself and address what I need to.
Emotional intelligence. Yeah, we don't spend a lot of time talking about that. It's such a we always talk about IQ, but EQ is such an interesting field of study and just a skill that um, creates whole people. Like fostering emotional intelligence is um, like we can all do a better job helping each other out, taking better care of ourselves. Um, but society isn't always okay with those things. They're kind of
Yeah, and, that's another thing that takes practice, and that's another thing that takes creating space, you know, to for all of us to be able to address that.
what's it been like for you to personally try like being an ambassador for spreading mental health awareness? Is there a message that doesn't get enough attention that you think we should work harder to get across?
Uh, you know, anything in this conversation around mental health is positive because it's creating space like we're talking about. For me, there's a lot of different elements that I believe aren't getting enough, um, you know, exposure in our society, and one of those is suicide. And that's why I do what I do. And the reason that I talk about my struggles all the way deep, all the way to my struggles with suicidal thoughts, is because I think that a lot of times in the mental health conversation, we stop at just saying the words mental health, especially like in this day and age where there's a lot more athletes talking about it. But I knew that with how hard I was struggling, that there would be other people out there, and now I believe that way more, that there's other people out there struggling with really dark suicidal thoughts and experiences that are fully enveloping, and I knew that by talking about these things, I would be able to connect and, resonate with people who really needed it most, because for me, that mental health conversation, if we don't include all the way down to suicide, all the way to of those feelings and emotions, then we're doing a disservice to what the real goal is in elevating this conversation in our society.
I want to compliment you on the way you talk about suicide and the way you talk about the ideations that you've had in the film. I really respect you. I find that, I guess, being a loss survivor, having my son die by suicide, I'm somewhat sensitive to the topic. And I feel like there can be right and wrong ways to talk about it. Obviously, I talk about it a lot, but I want to do it in a non-trauma informing way for others. And I really think you do a fine job of that. And I just really compliment you on that because not everybody does. There is a, I mean, it's not easy to talk about, but talking about a way in a way that helps others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And thank you very much for saying that because, you know, you and families like yours who have lost someone to suicide, like, you know the pain better than anyone. And the pain that I know is the pain that I experienced when I was on the verge of taking my own life. And, that's another opportunity and gift to be able to know what that feels like so that I can hopefully help other people.
Yeah. I struggled listening to you hear you say, like, I thought that everybody else would be better without me. That's a really tough one. Do you remember having that feeling?
Yeah. Um, when I say that in the film, that's very honest, and it's not just about one experience. When I'm in suicidal episodes and I'm feeling like all the way like the world would be better without me, like that's what it actually feels like. That everyone would be happier if I was gone. And the reason that I share that is because I think for people who haven't experienced suicidal thoughts and haven't been close to them, it's really hard to grasp that the people who end up taking their own lives can't see beyond that pain in that moment in time. Because even when I was feeling all that depth when I was suicidal, I would come out of that suicidal episode or before that suicidal episode, and I would wholeheartedly believe that I was loved and that I shouldn't kill myself, and that the world was better with me in it. But then when I'm in it, I don't believe that at all. And I think that's really hard for people to understand.
It is very difficult for even knowing that my son had probably similar thoughts. It's so hard for my mind hasn't been in that spot, and my mind can't like it's just hard to process.
Yeah. Um, a really big lesson that I've learned and I keep learning is how multiple things can be true simultaneously.
Multiple truths
Because
can be true simultaneously.
yeah, even when conflicting or seemingly conflicting, because like in that time period in my life, like I sincerely believe the world would be better without me in it. But outside of that suicidal episode, I believed that I was loved. And those things were both true in the experience that they were in. And I think that that's probably true for most people who we do end up losing to suicide, is
Hmm.
that, you know, when they're not in that suicidal episode, they probably saw too that they were loved and they believed that they were worth it. But the suicidal episodes are just a whole different animal.
That's for sure. I've tried to study and learn a ton about suicide itself, just because I wanted answers and I wanted to understand. And I guess I kind of conclude that it's super super complex. It can be very acute for some individuals. You know, I can be, and it can be very chronic. There's people who live with suicidal ideation for their entire life. And then sadly, there's some people who act on that very first episode. I don't think that I think I still believe suicide is preventable. I truly do. Otherwise, I would not be sitting here today visiting with you. Um, it's why I do the work that I do. Um, I heard you use the word hope. We can get through hard things. It's not easy. And like I love how you talk about that. Like you used to think life was climbing a mountain, like trying to get to that summit. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Uh, but that line in the film is just like something that came to me one day. Is especially in my world, in the ski world, in the outdoor world. People make films and tell stories and try to use the metaphor of climbing a mountain for life or for any other trial or tribulation in life. But I really think that's an awful metaphor because there's no summit. And especially when we're talking about mental health, there's no culmination, there's no solving or fixing, and there's no finish line, or you know, it keeps going.
It sure does. I
So
think
if
that's
there
like,
is a summit, then it's more like a ridge line than just one mountain. Because, like, for me and what I'm conscious of with all my advocacy, with my speaking, with my writing, is showing people that this is an ongoing life process because I want to make that clear. And, I think it's important for a lot of people to know that while you're struggling right now, like, there is hope for getting better. And it's about committing to a lifelong process and journey of growth.
yeah, it's work. Life is work. Like, it's not, um, there's no, finish line is perfect. I think I felt like that at the beginning of my journey of losing Robbie. Like, okay, I knew I had to do the work. My background, I was a funeral director. I wanted to be a bereavement counselor. I have a degree in psychology. So I knew like kind of what happens when someone loses someone they love to suicide. Um, and I kind of thought, oh, like I can get through this. I believe that, but I thought I had to do the work. And like I did a lot of bereavement counseling. I did a lot of talk therapy, a lot of journaling, just like really good self care. Talked about my feelings that were very uncomfortable with other people. I lost some friends. I gained some friends. I did the work. And here I am 4 years later, and I'm finally accepting like this is going to be lifelong work. Like those two truths that you talk about. Like, and for me, it's like that I can hold joy. I have been able to find joy again in my life. Um, but there's going to be that trauma and that grief, that loss together. Like I have to be able to hold both of them to be the person that I want to be. And that's,
Yeah, that's very, very well said. And that's a challenge and a process that so many of us are going through.
yeah, there's no summit, there's no 14er. It's just, it's the journey of life and being vulnerable with others. Do you feel like your purpose now in life is to help others?
Yeah, I really do. Now, I spent most of my life with skiing as like the lone direction of my compass. But now I really believe that changing our culture around mental health is my North Star. When I wake up in the morning, this is what I want to be doing, and I want to be able to help other people. And like I keep saying in this conversation, creating space to move things forward and you know make other people know that they're not alone.
Do you feel like we are moving forward with our conversations about mental health?
I definitely feel like we're moving forward. It's I'm conscious of making sure that it's not like just because this is what my frame of reference is now. Like if you're thinking about buying a red car, you're gonna notice all of the red cars out there. If I'm talking about mental health all the time, I'm also gonna notice that everybody's talking about mental health all the time. But I really do believe that this conversation is moving forward because it's moving forward with depth and meaning. It's reaching the communities that need it most. And the reason that I believe that is because, in my experience, it's not only reaching the communities and the people who need it, it's reaching communities and people who want this conversation. And that's why I believe it's moving forward. And the other part that gives me the most hope, honestly, is the younger generation because one of the greatest parts about what I get to do now is going into middle schools and high schools to go speak with students. And, you know, that's the most meaningful thing that I can do with my life right now. But what is the most inspiring is when I get to talk to those kids afterwards. And like I met met this group of 4 freshman boys at a high school in Vermont, and I was chatting with them after I gave a talk, and one of the boys said that he's been struggling with suicidal thoughts for years, and that his 3 friends were the people who he learned he could talk to, and that gave me probably the most hope for our society that I've ever had, because, man, being able to see that there's kids out there who are that emotionally intelligent to be able to talk about, suicidal thoughts, like, that's when it's gonna move our society and this whole conversation forward. So that's what gives me the most hope.
I absolutely agree with you. I think young people are just they're so inspirational. They're okay with being vulnerable with each other. They're okay with being vulnerable with people like you and I who touch their lives for just a second by sharing our stories. I feel like they have solutions. I don't know. They give me just really good energy. Like it's just so. I just admire young people, um, and it's they're positive for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I learn more from those high schoolers I get to go talk with than maybe they learn from me. So
It's
it's
very
a
rewarding. Yeah,
very positive energy cycle.
yeah. That's what life is about. Like, what would you say to someone who's struggling with their mental health and not receiving help?
The biggest thing I'd say is that you're worth it. You're worth help. You deserve help. You deserve love. And the reason being for anyone out there who hears this message is because you're a human on the planet Earth. And I sincerely believe that is all you need to be deserving of help and love and to be worthy of it. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest message I'd pass along. Um, I'd also I'd also just like to say that the greatest strength I've found in my life is through asking for help and digging into the deepest and darkest corners of my heart and soul. And that well of strength is something that I think that I could have gone 80, 90 years and lived a complete life never having tapped into. But now life is the greatest experience that I ever could have possibly imagined. And all of that started with asking for help. And I know that that's out there for every single human being.
It's a right of every human being. Everyone is worth it. I like how you talk about the strength from asking for help. I still struggle asking for help. I feel like I can do it on my own, and there are moments that most people can't understand what I'm feeling. Most I'm grateful most people have not in my circles have not lost a child, but asking for help in those dark moments is it's challenging, but I do it. I I know that I need to. Ah, what
I,
would you
for the record, just on that note, like I struggle with asking for help too. Like it's just like we're saying, it's a continuous learning process. I'm getting better and better at asking for help, and I'm proud of that. But it's still something I'm continuously learning how to do better.
I find in most of my relationships, my close relationships, is how that they have changed together. Like it's not just me asking for help. Like the people who care about me, they know that I need help in that moment, and they extend a different hand, a different like, hey, a different text, like, hey, I noticed this, and how much easier that just makes the whole process, probably for both of us.
So agreed. And I thought of a very specific text from a very specific friend that I just received yesterday. It's people like that that keep us learning and keep us growing.
Yeah, it makes life better for all of us. Ah, is there anything specifically? We've talked a little bit about your work with middle schoolers who are the age group. We really need to be teaching a lot of this too. Um, that you want teens to know, like just to contribute maybe? I mean, I think we're both trying to end some of the stigmas.
Yeah, wow. There's so much. um, Teenagers and kids have such an amazing opportunity at the age that they're at. The fact that you are alive when this conversation is being brought in so much, and that it's so inclusive, gives you an opportunity to step into it. And the other opportunity that I think kids and teenagers have is to learn a lot of these lessons really early on in life. And I'm only 28, and everyone I meet is that they express in some way that they are amazed that I've gotten to learn all of these lessons at a young age, and that I have a long lifetime to apply them and to keep growing. And teenagers and kids, you have a very long lifetime ahead, and you have an amazing opportunity to pursue all of that growth if you get started right now.
It's really good advice. I haven't thought about it that way. There's so many ways to learn about this. Some of it's not being taught in the schools. I'm glad to hear that you've been in some schools. There's some schools that are very reluctant to bring this education to their students, but young people are finding things from so many different avenues, and find the good information, good research, and learn about your mental health, learn about how your brain works, learn about what to look for in yourself, in a loved one, and then more importantly, what to do. Like, mental illness is treatable.
Exactly. And you know I think that another big piece of being young and being alive at a time when this conversation is at the forefront is that every time we talk about these things, it takes off a layer of the shame that we feel and the stigma that we feel talking about hard things like depression or suicide. So start talking about them now. And I know that young people are having these conversations, and that's why I'm so inspired by them. Because by having these conversations, they're going to peel away that shame and that stigma to a point where they can grow much fuller than the rest of us, than those of us who are a little older than them ever will.
You're still young, Drew. I just turned 50. I'm not feeling as young as I used to, but that's a state of mind that I'm going to work on. I believe I have a lot of opportunity for growth and continue to grow. I hope that's beauty of life. So we end every one of our conversations with the same question. It doesn't have to apply to teens. It can just be whatever strikes you after I ask it. And that question is, what does the world need to hear right now?
On the note of this conversation, like the first thing that comes to mind that I wish the world could know is just it's not it's okay to be not be okay. The other themes in this conversation are exactly what I want to pass on to the world. That you're worth it. You're worthy of love and help and a better future. A mantra that I lean on a lot too, and uh, I think that the whole world would be better off, not just people who struggle with mental illness or who are even having a conversation around mental health. Is mood follows action.
Can you repeat that for me?
Mood follows action. The science and lived experience both show that when we take the first step, when we engage with the activity, we're going to feel motivated. We're going to feel driven afterwards. The motivation isn't going to come first. The positive feelings aren't going to come first. So if you're sitting in bed and you're depressed and you're like, man, I don't have the motivation to go to the gym today or to get out of bed or to, call that friend. Well, the reality is that that feeling of being able to do that or being ready to do that is only going to come after you take the first step. So just get in motion.
Motion. That's good advice. Well, Drew, this has been a fantastic conversation. I so appreciate your time. And just thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to our listeners, I encourage you to tune in to our next episode. And remember, hope, hold on, pain ends.